My name is Orville Rogers. In 1941, I was 24 years old, but I was a little bit older than the average cadet, and but I did my best to be the best pilot ever born, and I loved it, and I had some great instructors. I thought God wanted me in some kind of vocational service, so I went to seminary in Fort Worth. I enrolled about September the 15th, and 5 weeks later I got my draft notice. So that was God's way of turning me around. So I went down to the draft board and said, hey, can I get in the Army Air Corps as a cadet for pilot training? And they said, sure. So I was in 5 weeks before Pearl Harbor and stayed in until 46, a year after the war ended. I was in the training command all of World War II, except for the last month. I was assigned to B-17 training, and the war ended the day after I got there. But they continued the training, and I did finish B-17 training, but of course never did go overseas. But if they hadn't dropped the bombs, I would have probably been in the Pacific Theater in another couple of months, without a doubt. It may have saved my life. I instructed in the twin-engine flying training program. We started out with 18-9s. It was a beautiful little all-aluminum trainer. Curtiss Wright built it, but they were short of aluminum, so they stopped making them because they needed the aluminum for the warplanes. In primary, I first got my aerobatic experience, and we were flying the Ryan PT-22, I think it was. Great little airplane. And it was one of the first airplanes I ever flew upside down. The rest of them were not stressed for it. But I loved the training program, enjoyed every airplane, but in the final phase of my cadet training, we had the AT-17, the Cessna. They call it the bamboo bomber. It was sticks and fabric, and it wasn't a very good trainer, but it taught people how to fly. So I flew it both as a cadet and then later as an instructor. After flying the AT-17 about 6 or 8 months, we got B-25s, and boy, did we love that. I instructed in the B-25 about 3 years, and loved that airplane. I was in cadet training when Doolittle's raid occurred, and in my mind's eye, I could wish I had been in on that, but I was a couple of years too late. I was stationed at Roswell, New Mexico, which was a pilot training base and a navigator bombardier base as well. They had paved nearly a 1 square mile of asphalt, and they marked off lanes, about 5 on each side for takeoff and 5 for landing on the other side. And in the morning when the flight training and bombardier training started, there was a huge congestion problem. But it worked well because we'd taxi out in line and take the first one of whatever lanes were open. And then the next plane would catch the next lane that was open. We just took off and flew like that. And the same way with landing, we'd get on base leg and turn in. And if there was a lane open, well, we'd take it. If there's not, we'd go around and try again. But I don't think we had any fatal accidents at Roswell that I'm aware of. We had 1,200 airplanes at Roswell at one time, about half for pilot training and half for navigator bombardier training. So when we got the B-25s, we loved it because we could get up above all the other traffic for our transition work. And so we were flying up around 15,000 or so, and even much higher. I've been to 23,000 unpressurized. We didn't know any better, but we loved that airplane. Boy, it was a great airplane. But North American flat-built great airplanes. I flew all 3 of their airplanes in World War II. and in the reserve after I got out. I flew the T-6 some, even though it was a twin-engine base. We could check out any airplane on the base and fly it in our spare time, and I'd check out a T-6, and we'd go out and practice aerobatics and dogfighting in the T-6. I loved that. Then we got the B-25, which was the best medium bomber ever built, and I stayed in the reserve at Hensley Field near Dallas, and they had two P-51s there. And boy, did I love that airplane. That was the best fighter airplane ever built in its day. And I only got about 20 hours in it, but I sure did enjoy flying it. I met Chuck Yeager a few years later, and we talked a good bit about the P-51. Of course, he loved it as well. The mechanics didn't like me because I like to fly inverted a lot, aerobatics of all kinds. And inverted, the P-51 would lose oil out the breather pipe, and it'd get all over the tail. So when I brought the airplane back home, the mechanics would have to clean it up. But I wish I could apologize to them, and I never knew who actually did the work. But it was a great airplane. I could, from level flight, I could gain 5,000 feet in an M1 maneuver. So that was a huge performance. So I love the P-51. They speeded up the training program by 2 months. Normally, the cadet program would take 8 months to complete, to get your wings and commissioned as a second lieutenant. But after Pearl Harbor, they realized they really had a problem, a shortage of pilots. So they shortened it up to 6 months. So I graduated in 6 months and 23 days. And it was pretty hectic because we were flying all kind of hours and rushing it up. And there were a huge number of accidents, many of them fatal, in the training command during World War II because we needed pilots so very badly that they speeded things up to the extent that we were cutting corners here and there. And I don't fault that at all. We needed the pilots so badly in Europe and later Pacific that it was justified, but it was not without cost. We were so busy, we didn't have much time to live. At Roswell, on weekends, we usually had Saturday and Sunday off, and a lot of us would go to the bowling alley in Roswell, and there was a cute girl there whose father owned the bowling lane, so she got a lot of attention, as you might imagine. But also on weekends, we'd check out airplanes as if flying 5 days heavily was not enough. We'd check out a T-6 and go out and practice dogfighting or aerobatics of one kind or another. And it was a fun time, but we were so busy, we didn't really have much time to catch up on what was going on in the world around us. We'd get the general picture, but we never did get to the details of Pearl Harbor and all that sort of stuff till much later. But we were so busy we didn't have time to concentrate on world news much or even local news. So we just lived for flying, and that's about it. When I was instructing in the B-25s, we had 2 classes of Chinese students. I didn't know that that was in the works, but the government had recruited a number of young Chinese young men and brought them over here for training to go back and serve with whatever was of the Chinese Air Force. And I had 2 or 3 classes of Chinese. My wife and I had planned our wedding for May the 1st, 1943. It took 2 months of training, and at the end of each time, we'd get a week off. And so we scheduled our wedding so I could go to Norman, Oklahoma, where my fiancée lived, and we'd get married there. I had 5 copies of my orders in hand, granting me a leave of 7 days. And the night before I was to leave, on the leave, they canceled it. Some of the brass had decided that they needed to give the Chinese students gunnery training. And so they wouldn't let us go because they wanted to set up the gunnery program. Well, that took time. And as it worked out, we got married on June the 3rd, it was. And there were more Chinese at my wedding than there were Americans, because my fellow instructors who were instructing American students got their leave and they went home or whatever, and all my friends were gone. I even had trouble finding a best man. But the Chinese were very helpful. I enjoyed working with them. The language problem was evident, but on the ground we'd have translators. In the air we'd use hand signals a lot, but they managed to do pretty good. All the Chinese cadets, they were student officers, not cadets, but all of them finished in the 2 classes I instructed, and did pretty well. The interesting sideline to that is that many of them who were about 19, 20, 21 years old had never driven a car. And here they were flying the B-25, a medium bomber. But they did well. It's been a great life. Man, have I enjoyed life. I'm a believer. And my Lord Jesus Christ told his disciples that I came that you might have eternal life. But the icing on the cake was that he said, I came that you might have abundant life. And I've taken him at his word. I live life aggressively. I live life fully. I enjoy life. And even at my age, I still anticipate more adventures with friends and with my God. And there's no end to it until death, of course. And I'm not I don't have a fatalistic attitude, but hey, I'm at the point where my life expectancy is very short. And I'm ready for that. I'm fully prepared. I know who I am. I know whose I am. I know where I am, and I know where I'm going. So I'm ready, but I'm not anxious for it because I still enjoy life. And aviation, reading about it, and to some degree participating in it is a real joy to me. I read all I can get about flying, and I went to Oshkosh last year, and that was a terrific experience. I had hoped to get in on a parachute drop for the opening ceremony this year, but it didn't work out. They don't take outsiders. They're a team. But that would have been fun. I think they start each day with a parachute drop, and I enjoyed seeing a lot of those. I had a dual drop about 10 years ago now when I was 91, and I enjoyed it very much. I was up in North Texas, and we went up to about 15,000 feet and bailed out. And I wanted to go solo, but they thought I was too old. But I've enjoyed flying to the limit. I have a total of almost 43,000 hours. I flew for an airline 30 and a half years. I was in the military a total of 6.5 years, Army Air Corps World War II and the U.S. Air Force in Korea. I've served as a missionary pilot in Africa for 13 months, and I have delivered 46 missionary airplanes worldwide for missionary work. About 20 of them were inside the United States, but 26 airplanes I've flown to Southeast Asia, South America, and Africa. in about equal numbers. I've crossed the ocean 20 times in singles and light twins, and it takes a little bit of courage to do that. One of the well-known sayings about aviation is that there are old pilots and there are bold pilots, but there are no old, bold pilots. That's not true. I consider myself to be a pretty bold pilot. I own 3 different airplanes, a Cessna 205 and a Waco UPF-7, and both of those were great airplanes. And I ended up with a Cessna 210, a high-wing single-engine airplane, pretty fast. And I flew it all over the United States and took my wife with me on a lot of trips. I wanted to fly over an ocean with her on a delivery flight of a missionary airplane, and God provided it. About 1993, I think it was, they gave me a Piper Aztec twin-engine to fly from North Carolina to Indonesia. That's almost halfway around the world. And I took my wife on that trip, and she really loved it. She enjoyed flying with me. I took her up as my first passenger when I got my private license. It's been a great life, and I'm very thankful to God that He's given me all these years to enjoy it. I see their message quite a bit. I think they're very effective, particularly in reaching out to the young people. Well, the air shows are the #1 attraction, of course. And by the way, yesterday I saw the T-6s, 4 of them flying, and they really put on a show. I enjoyed that very much. I've been to Oshkosh one time, and they're tops for air shows, as you know. But I really enjoyed yesterday. That was really fun. And I had never seen a parachute drop like that before. They were kind of simulating Normandy, and there were 26 parachutes out of, 4 airplanes, I think. And that was really impressive. World War II was different, particularly in that it ended with the atom bomb drops. And it has a history that no other conflict has. And Commemorative Air Force is very responsible in maintaining the effort to educate the general public, and particularly the young people, as to what actually happened during World War II and how the Air Force, then known as the Army Air Corps, helped with the invasion of Normandy, for example, and the battle over Britain and the bombing runs over Germany and other areas. They keep that story alive, and I commend you for that.